we will start you off with this question. Free agent for 2020. Both of these guys are on the market still. Both of them play defensive end. If you had a choice and you could pursue and sign Everson Griffen, who of course has been a lifetime Viking until now when he opted out of his contract after the season, or noted pass rusher Jadeveon Clowney, which one would you pursue if you were Rick Spielman as we get set for the start of training camp in a couple weeks?
Realistically, from a financial standpoint and from a very seamless scheme standpoint, almost, no transition at all, it's Everson Griffen, without a question. If you wanted, I guess, would you call it an upgrade potentially at that position? It would be a Jadeveon Clowney. But there's definitely, if you could get one or the other, like when you talk about pass rushers reaching their prime, Everson's right in the middle of it at 32 years old. Jadeveon Clowney's 27. We don't know how, there are a lot of people that I've spoken with that, will kind of give the whole, he's just scratching the surface of his potential. And that's obviously incredibly intriguing, but it's a guy who has not played a full season since 2018. And the stuff that, he's dealt with some injuries over the last few years, and obviously he's got a hefty price tag associated with him. So when I'm trying to think about how can I actually construct my team and not be shelling out, I'm sure the price has dropped, but if it's going to be $16 or $17 million a year, you can't afford that. Go with Everson.
Right. Clowney intrigues me because of this. He's not getting paid for 2020. He's just not. I don't think it's going. Teams can't afford it.
Deal.
Right. Exactly right. And so if I was Spielman and I called Clowney's reps, I would say this: Zim's a defensive guy. Okay. This league's filled with what? Offensive guys. A lot of offensive guys. Zim is a defensive guy. His defenses are sound. They're good. They're based in fundamental principles that ordinarily work. Why don't you sign a 1-year deal here, hit the market again next March? I think there's some attractiveness to the Vikings where if you made the pitch right to Clowney and his people, there's a fairly compelling case to say, we're not going to get paid, so let's do the best that we possibly can. So perhaps in 2021, he gets paid on, take your pick, 4-year contract.
Sure. It all makes sense, but you also have to think about how many pass rushers are still out there on the open market. I was taking a look at the list of free agents recently. And yeah, I think he's obviously one of the best ones, still available, but, Clay Matthews is out there. Terrell Suggs is still out there. Obviously Everson, Michael Bennett's still out there. I think that you want to, there's a lot of teams that could still afford and pay for his services and want his services. So if you're talking about a prove it deal versus can you actually get closer to what you want, even if it's in a place that maybe they want a 3-year deal instead of I don't know if he wants to do that again. The deal that he had with Seattle was essentially that, the prove it type deal. Do you want to, if you're craving long-term stability, you're probably not going to get it just because we're in the midst of this pandemic. And teams, I think in the case of Everson Griffen, teams want to be able to work you out. They want to be able to, meet with you in person. Same thing for Jadeveon Clowney. It's why the process has been such a holdup at this point. And guys want to figure out, do you want to keep going 1 year to 1 year to 1 year? Where's going to be your forever home, or where you're going to take this next phase of your career? If I'm Jadeveon Clowney, I'm seeking that. So whatever I can get to be the closest to that versus a 1-year deal, because I already did that, is probably what I'd go after.
Who does that though? Right now, it seems like that ship has sailed for as you said with the list of players that you broached, Courtney. It seems like there is a large list of guys who ordinarily by now are long gone and probably got signed, in April. Who are in jeopardy of not being signed. Forget cheap deals. There is probably a few guys that are in jeopardy because of the environment and situation that we're in right now of simply not getting jobs.
Yeah. And and some guys may have to and may want to sit this season out and just work out and be ready to go for 2021 because of the uncertainty of A, getting paid, and also B, are they going to have a season? Is it shortened? What if you get hurt? And it's, there's a whole mess of stuff to go through. So I think if you're Clowney, you're probably weighing that because you're 27 years old and you have the luxury of time. Everson Griffen's 32. And we know that pass rushers tend to get better with age. And I mean, he's a guy who, has not missed. He has not been injured outside of the plantar fasciitis in 2017. This is somebody who has, not missed games. And, in 2018, obviously he had some of the off the field stuff with mental health, but he still played 10 games. And, when he came back, he was, relatively, I think, was able to kind of pick back up where he left off. And I mean, last year, 8 sacks, 24 quarterback hits. I mean, he's still a very productive player at his age. And if, but it's also, he doesn't have the luxury necessarily of time to like sit out another year. Because what if the Vikings end up if they do play this year and like they move on essentially from Everson, it's not like he can come back here necessarily and finish his career in a year, because Ifeadi Odenigbo might assume that role, assuming they don't sign anybody else. So, I mean, I think that Clowney's in the situation where he could be like, I'm going to chill this year. I'm going to wait till I'm 28 to come back, rehab your body. He's had more injuries, I think, than like Everson has probably ever dealt with.
I think, yes.
That's why he hasn't played a full season in since 2018. So time's on his side. I just don't think it's really the same case for Everson Griffen.
If I'm Griffen, I think I pick up the phone, I call Mike, I call Rick, and I, to a certain degree, plead, bring me back.
Come back. Yeah.
Yeah. I think your point is right. And I mean, do you really want to sign with the Detroit Lions? Like, do you really want to do that? I think I would take a 1-year team favorable deal and say, you know what? I tried. I'm still productive. He's still good.
He would get his role right away.
Yeah, exactly. I think I would beg just a little bit.
Well, like you mentioned, like if you end up, and he knows this too, when he took the deal to bet on himself, the contract more than a year ago, the one that ended up voiding after this season, or after 2019 season. And I think he learned from the Jared Allens of the world how that type of stuff works, that, it's sometimes better to go with what take a little bit of a discount than try to go earn the next big payday, because you could be out of the league in a year. If you don't perform up to a certain standard to perform to back your contract, your career could be over. He knows the system in Minnesota. He doesn't have to start over. It's literally, he may have not been part of any offseason program, but he could probably pick that up pretty quickly because he knows Andre Patterson. He's been with him,
It's virtual too, so
yeah. And it's just like, I mean, any new wrinkles they add. I mean, the guy's a smart player. He can pick up on stuff like that. Sure. And I just think that it's the devil you do know versus the devil you don't. And I think that you want to bet on yourself. You want to be able to make go for your next big contract. I just don't think at this point, if you weren't in that first wave of free agency, you're not getting that deal.
I think you're right.
For anybody. I mean, even Jadeveon Clowney is going to have to take somewhat of a pay cut, and it's not going to be that $19-20 million figure that was thrown out there March 17th. Like, it's going to be less than that.
Right. Yeah. 1 year, make good, get paid. The scary thing among the group of guys that we're talking about too, for them is this. They're almost certainly not going to, quote, get paid for 2020, Courtney. And there's a very good chance that they're not going to get paid a lot in 2021. So, I mean, the timing for some veteran players on the market simply could not have been worse. And their career earning potential is probably going to plummet compared to the expectation of this, if this were, let's say, 2015 or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reality. That's the reality of the situation. And with, the language that's in the contract and force majeure and all these other things that could be affected down the line with, NFL contracts. If you don't already have your deal, if you don't already have the guarantees, and, if you don't already have your situation locked up, then you could be looking at potentially an earlier exit than you were anticipating.
Speaking of guys that might come in, do you expect them still? And I've been expecting this, and it could come late. But do you expect them still to sign a veteran corner at some point? Because I can't believe that they're gonna go to training camp with Mike Hughes as sort of the veteran of the group. It just seems.
I mean, the guy's played a season and a half. I mean, he's been injured. Like, not even. I don't even know if he's at a full 16 games yet. I'd have to look that up. Because the injuries, and he's hurt week 5 of 6 of 2018. Regardless, like that's tough. I mean, is it Logan Ryan? Is it Dre Kirkpatrick? I mean, again, you can find veterans on the cheap right now. A guy like Logan Ryan's not going to get what he was asking for or hoping for from Tennessee. So now you could look at that situation and say, hey, come here on essentially another 1-year prove it type deal. And, same thing for a guy like Dre Kirkpatrick, who played with Mike Zimmer in Cincinnati. Like, obviously that didn't work out for George Iloka when he came over. And you think like, oh, this guy's played for him. He knows the defense in and out. Well, it's gonna, that obviously didn't work out that way. But when you need help at that position, like that's the one that you look at and say, hey, clock's ticking. When are they going to try to pick up somebody that's just sitting out there in free agency? Because you especially with that nickel position. And Mike Hughes is a terrific nickel corner. I think that that is his future, but they're going to need help on the outside first. I mean, you probably start Mike Hughes outside, probably filling in for Rhodes, and you start Jeff Gladney, who has, quite a bit of work under his belt from playing that position at TCU. So, I mean, there's a good situation there if you can get somebody else in that you have the depth then that you need. Because they have a ton of corners going into camp. I personally think that they end up keeping 7, on the roster. 6 or 7 seems like the safe bet because it's a position that, you're starting over. And I honestly think that starting over is the best thing you could possibly do because the pass defense was so atrocious last year at times. And a lot of that was, Xavier Rhodes and Trey Waynes. So yeah, it might be a lot of growing pains early on, but starting over is the best thing that's happened to this defense. And it's why I think they're going to be able to rebound and be something better than what they were.
So week 1, it's Hughes outside. Do you think Gladney outside? And then does Hughes slide inside in the nickel? And if he does, who comes and replaces him outside in week 1, do you think?
Can you trust Holton Hill? Is that going to be your answer? Is it going to be Cam Dantzler, who I think has, he's slight. That's what
Cam Dantzler, that's a lot to ask of that kid.
I know.
Right? I mean, that's a huge ask.
Well, can you trust Holton Hill? Yeah,
you might have to.
You do. And I think that there's reason to believe that even if they don't sign a veteran corner, that Mike Hughes could still remain as, your nickel, and you just try to piece it together however you can, whether it's Holton Hill and Cam Dantzler. Harrison Hand is that other draft pick that's really intriguing. They signed Neville Clark, who was at UDFA. They guaranteed $100,000 to. I mean, does he make the team? Maybe Chris Boyd. He played a big role on special teams. Like, if we're talking about guys in training camp that could take a much bigger role on next year, I think that's somebody who shows a lot of promise given what happened for him in his rookie season. But it's tough to say, how good this unit will be if they don't have somebody with a little bit more experience than Mike Hughes, and not just a camp body either, like bringing somebody in that you actually assume will start at the nickel spot. Because I consider it a starting position. There's teams in their nickel barely in a freaking base ever. So it's a starting position, and you want to shore that up. You don't want to leave that to chance.
So if I'm Zim, I go into Rick's office and I say to him, Rick, I'm going into the last year of my contract.
So are you.
And so are you. And our corners, I can work and coach them up. God bless them. But I can't in my head get around the fact that Mike is going to approve of not having at least one veteran coach-like type of guy back there to say, you know what, that's wrong, or do this or do that. It seems like a recipe to fail. Not to have a depth chart of young guys. I get that. But to have a depth chart that lacks any veteran guy who at a position that the head coach takes so much pride in. This is his baby.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that's a great point. It's the biggest position of need still for them. Like, they'll be better, I think, eventually with the group of corners that they have. I mean, Rhodes was on, the last leg of his time in Minnesota since he, started dealing with all those injuries in the 2018 season. You could see the decline coming. And with Trey Waynes, he never lived up to that 11th overall pick number. And so you have a chance to start over, but don't you want to give yourself a little bit of a leg up by trying to not just be like completely full, clean slate? I would tend to think that you'd want to bring in, and you can get cornerbacks on the cheap, a veteran guy. I mean, and you could even still, if you really wanted to go to a rotation, you could still do that. But to be able to have somebody back there who can play, your outside corner spotter and nickel. It gives you flexibility with what you do with Mike Hughes. And also, some of the younger guys too, that might just not be there right away. I know that we expect okay, because they have to have Jeff Gladney play outside, given everybody else is gone. It might not be as smooth. I mean, that's a hard position to play in the NFL to begin with.
I'm with you totally. Yes,
exactly. The jump from college to the NFL at the corner position, and given who you're playing for and what's required of being a quarterback in Mike Zimmer's defense, is tough.
Aaron Rodgers is going to look at Jeff Gladney, and I don't care if he's washed or not, he's going to salivate like my dog does at dinner time.
Think about what happened when Drew Brees, it was like Holton Hill had to go in the first time. How many times did he get targeted?
So what happens too? So with the current list of players at corner that we are talking about too, what happens to Holton Hill gets beaten or Gladney gets beaten? Okay, you know what Zim does? He melts down.
Yeah.
So Jeff Gladney goes to the sideline and this guy is a raving lunatic maniac yelling, and nobody is there to be like, hey kid, it's fine, let's go through this, except a position coach. This just seems to be setting yourself up for unnecessary problems, when it would just help to have one guy stick his arm around Gladney and say, okay, first of all, that's Mike, that's just Mike. Second of all, here's what you did wrong.
Yeah.
Because during a game, I don't think Mike's here's the technique I'm looking for. I think it's you bleep and blew that, With Rhodes, we saw it constantly, Courtney.
For sure. I'm
trying to help these people out.
And he played for a guy in Gary Patterson. They had some explosive sideline exchanges. I mean, he even told us about it after the draft. And I think that it's a good thing because he's already kind of had experience with, a coach that is not afraid to go at you. But having a veteran, Aqib Talib, Morris Claiborne, those guys are still out there. Logan Ryan, like I mentioned.
Yes.
It's just
somebody,
to be able to have a coach too. Mike Hughes got more praise as a rookie than any other rookie cornerback under Mike Zimmer in Minnesota. Very special player. But can you put this much on him when you have so many other gaping holes that you just don't know about in that secondary at the cornerback position? I think that's a lot to ask. So getting somebody who could almost be like a secondary coach, not like a secondary coach, but a version of Mike Zimmer or, the position coach on the field, I think is really beneficial. Somebody who knows the scheme, which is why I think the Dre Kirkpatrick thing for so long seemed like the most logical approach to bringing in a veteran guy.
Hughes broke his neck too, correct?
What's that?
Hughes broke his neck. He's not, it's not like a twisted knee.
Yeah. No. He had a fractured vertebrae or something.
Okay. But that's, you can't just say, oh, he's going to be fine. That's a problem, a serious injury.
That was an answer that they gave us, oh yeah, by the way, going into New Orleans, no cornerbacks anymore. Everybody's hurt. Kind of where the hell did this happen? But no, that's absolutely, he obviously, I think he's past the ACL from a few years ago. It's not a concern, but he did have that injury late last season that you have to be worried about. All right.
Thanks much. Good stuff. She's Courtney Cronin. I'm Judd Zolgad, Declan Goff producing. You have been watching and or listening to Purple Daily. We'll talk to you later. Bye.